Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to give all praise to Yahweh, Ba'Hashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'Hashem Rakakadash, Dil the elders and apostles of Great Millstone, who are teaching this truth with sincerity. And shout out to the Akims out there in the four quarters of the earth proclaim this truth. Braka the Yahweh, Braka the Yahweh Shai, Ba'Hashem Rakakadash, Brakatum. So, 3 weeks into World War III, and new threats within 48 hours. If Iran does not open up the Strait of Hormuz immediately, within 48 hours, that Donald Trump is threatening to blow up their infrastructure. Yeah, threatening to blow up all their infrastructure. So, you know what that means in a retaliatory strike, right? You know, because, of course, like everything else, you know, the king of Babylon ain't fucking backing down from this whatsoever. Still, you know, no real videos of King Bibi. All have been AI. All have been fake. But, see, that's not the only one. Of course, on the Iran side, the Ayatollah, the new one, has not been seen since the war broke out either. Because, of course, he was injured in those attacks. So, you know, the rumor has it that he is, you know, he was taken to Moscow for medical emergency. That's the rumor. Okay, that's whether that proves to be true or not, you know, is another thing. But it's nonetheless, though, Iran is still making decisions and still able to defend itself, fighting a world war, you know, pretty much. And like everything else, so their infrastructure, their survival, you know, is being threatened by the king of Babylon, you know, and of course the Israeli state. Now, there was a false flag yesterday, you know, saying that one of their ICBMs was fired at the Diego Garcia, you know, the British side. See, like everything else, Britain has already approved that the U.S. bases can use it to coordinate their terror attacks against Iran. So Britain's already given them the okay to go ahead and fire away. You go ahead and use them. So there would be no need for that, right? Well, that didn't stop the Israeli state and the U.S., whichever one of them did it, to try to create a false flag to try to draw Great Britain in further into the war, because all the allies have turned their backs against the king of Babylon, and pretty much they don't want to get involved. You know, his plans to try to take Karg Island, because that's where the Marines right now are being deployed, is to try to take over Karg Island, which is an offensive that's even greater than Vietnam. Donald Trump, not too worried about Vietnam-style combat, you know, shrugs that off. And like everything else, though, he's already stated on numerous occasions that he does this for fun. You know, that's very fun, and he's going to make a lot of money. A lot of people are going to get rich off of that. He shares the same sentiment as Lindsey Graham, who said the same thing. They're going to make a lot of money. But what they're not telling you is how much money, you know, Iran is making off of this, right? Because like everything else, though, the Strait of Hormuz has been closed ever since this war began. And not only are they asking for a toll in order to cross safely, which all countries do it, Egypt does it, and so does others to pass through their canals. Well, even Panama Canal, to keep that open, they get a commission, they get a toll. So pretty much, though, you know, but they're asking to be paid in the yuan, because like everything else, the BRICS members have figured out how to trade in their own currencies, bypassing the dollar, making the dollar completely useless. So the only oil that's going to be getting out are those that are in the interest of Russia and Iran, and China for that matter. See, like everything else, though, China's still aligned with Iran. China doesn't have any back deals with the U.S. because, of course, Donald Trump made that clear, you know, that he promised additional tariffs and additional tariffs and tariffs and tariffs and tariffs. So they're saying, you know what, man, we want to get out. Why do we want to get along with a tyrant like this, with someone that maniacal? You know, that's what all the nations are saying. You know, why would they want to deal with someone so maniacal? You know, it tells every country that if he doesn't like their government, that he's just going to take them over, like he's planning to do with Cuba very soon, right? But boots are on the ground as we speak. We already know that they've been seen leaving Singapore, headed to West Asia, you know, on their way there, and that they plan to try to create an offensive. So there's going to be a ground war within the next few days. A ground war invasion of Karg Island, which is going to be very suicidal. And we already know about the 100,000 deployed, and like everything else, though, there's more being deployed, but they're not telling that publicly. Of course, like everything else, though, they're giving everybody the illusion that this thing's going to be over in a couple of weeks, that they've almost achieved all their goals, right? That's what you're hearing. Oh, we've achieved almost all the goals. But Iran's still firing back and still hitting bases. I can definitely tell that, as they say, almost 90% of their missiles are depleted, right? You know, their missile stockpiles are depleted, right? And that they've almost achieved their goals. Well, yesterday they targeted their nuclear plant, and of course Iran did retaliate against the Israeli state's nuclear plant. Now, like everything else, though, there's no casualties on either side of the nuclear plants being hit, but the fact that, okay, this is starting to get beyond Ukraine, because remember, Ukraine targeted the nuclear plants as well to try to say it was Russia. See how everybody's drawing in? The men of war are drawing near, and they're coming up. And the weak are staying the strong, because Iran was always thought of as a third world country and showing themselves to be much more formidable. And they're saying straight out the gate that we're not Vietnam, we're not Iraq, we're not Afghanistan, we're not Syria. You're not going to be able to get away with it. We are the ones that will punish America for invading. You know, we're the ones that can. So like everything else, though, they're also doing well economically, because, of course, you have to pay a toll to pass the Strait of Hormuz, as Jimmy Dore was going into yesterday.
Egypt charges tolls on the Suez Canal. Panama charges on the Panama Canal.
See?
Germany on the Kiel Canal. Greece on the Corinth Canal. Canada and USA on the St. Lawrence Seaway. But Iran can't charge in the Strait of Hormuz.
See how hypocritical that is?
Well, it turns out they can.
Yeah.
And it turns out they're doing it. Big news is Iran is now charging $2 million a ship to go through the Strait of Hormuz. So that's where all the oil goes. So that's like that's why all the whole world's economy is teetering right now, because they've stopped the oil going through the Strait of Hormuz, which goes to China, India, goes to Japan, goes everywhere. Plus
that's better than a nuke.
Plus the liquid net, it's better than a nuke. And so now they're going to charge $2 million per ship. And Al Jazeera says Iran is developing a vetting system for the Strait of Hormuz transit. Lloyd lists reports that ships could be allowed to pass through a safe corridor once they are approved by Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The Maritime News and Analysis Service reported this week that several countries, including India, Pakistan, Iraq, Malaysia, and China, are in direct talks with Tehran to transit through its territorial waters in the strait. So there's thousands of boats that are waiting to get through. So here Mario Nafal tweets out, he says, Iran has officially monetized the Strait of Hormuz, $2 million per voyage, and it's accepted in cash or crypto or barter.
Oh.
So that's three. So right now there's 3,200 ships and 40,000 sailors are waiting on the other side of that price tag.
So here's like we're gonna bust out the weather weapons now, because.
And it comes out that they are using HARP against Iran, you know, to try to change the outcome of this, right? Because they're losing bases right and left. You know, Iran's been firing back from day one, you know, showing that they are capable of fighting back. So, like everything else, well, they can't really, you know, stop Iran, you know, pretty much. And they're waiting. They're waiting for the landings. They're waiting patiently for it. And see, we've been waiting patiently for this as well. You know, that how will everything transform? Well, we're seeing it, right? You know, how will they usher in the MOTB? How will they usher in that new world order? Well, not only that, they're talking about another lockdown. This time, World Health Organization is talking about another lockdown, and also telling everybody to prepare for nuclear fallout. Letting you know that World War III, the nuclear war, is inevitable, that it is going to happen in our time. You know, so even they're warning about it, and they're talking about another lockdown. At this time, you know, just because, you know, the narrative's not being spun the way that they wanted to. I mean, you've already heard, you know, the king of Babylon very pissed off because they're not reporting the way they want to. Hegseth expressing frustration as well, because they're just not reporting the war that they want to. People ain't supporting the war that they want to. A No King's protest planned for March 28th this month. You know, again, you know, and even Robert De Niro and other celebrities are actually helping to lead it. So they couldn't be in a worse shit pickle than they already are. There's no exit strategy whatsoever, except to now you know, send ground troops in. It's the only other options there, because like everything else, though, Iran's not calling for a ceasefire. They're calling for an end to the war, meaning they want to end the U.S. hegemony, the empire once and for all, the evil empire. You've heard those terms. Only difference is now the script has been flipped, right? Now everybody sees Esau Edom for what it is. They see America for what it is, that they're the hammer of the whole earth. They're the ones that, make everything desolate, cause their habitation to be desolate. And the Israeli state, is that place, and like everything else. So Turkey is next. They're saying that Turkey is next, that after they're done with Iran, that they're going after Turkey. And if King Bibi is dead, their former prime minister already stated that he wants to go after Turkey next. He also said that he wanted to wipe Damascus off the face of the map. He said that when Assad was in power. So, how much more now? Because like everything else, though, they want dominance, and in the Greater Israel Project is, of course, to have the dominance over those regions, right? To bring in their false Messiah. Or as they say, the Antichrist, because a lot of people still are hung up on that word. You hear all these so-called Christian scholars saying, well, they want to usher in the Antichrist. Well, the Antichrist system is already here. The Antichrist system is Esau Edom, because Satan, or Antichrist, anti-Messiah, well, that's Esau to a T, right? That's the high governments of Esau Edom, So like everything else, though, well, they want to have full control over everyone. And they want to be able to implant everyone with a device that you will not be able to buy or sell. And of course, like everything else, though, we know about the guillotines. Trump has bragged about bringing back the guillotines. He said that in his first term, right? So how much more do they already have this system already set up? They just got to have the right events. Well, they've been telling you about, sleeper cells everywhere, and about, supposedly a drone attack happened on a U.S. military base over here. We're hearing about that. So they're trying to bring in some false flags, to try to usher it in, right? By saying that Iran now fired on Diego Garcia, that they've been using ICBMs, which they haven't really brought those out yet. Iran, of course, has said that, no, we did not fire upon Diego Garcia, but it can become a military target easily. But they haven't brought those out yet. See, the final ICBMs, the nuclear ones, well, that'll be Russia and its allies. And, well, I believe more than anything else, though, once Damascus is compassed, and has, because it tells you in the scriptures straight out the gate that the nuclear war shortly follows that, right? And that they, Amalek, will make their habitations desolate with them, meaning that, okay, sounds like a Samson option to me, because they've been talking a lot about the Samson option, because Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and a lot of those other places are being wiped out, as we speak, in the retaliatory strikes. And King Bibi is not to be found or heard from, so a lot of things are into place. Now, like everything else, though, they wanted this. They've been planning it for some time. All part of their final plan for the Greater Israel Project. Even if they have to sacrifice their own, it's just part of the way that they deal. But they need to get something done very soon, and, well, they're preparing. They're preparing to pretty much cause everything to be desolate with them. So we can see what the preparations are, and like everything else, though, lockdowns are coming. Did we not tell you that COVID 2020 was just the beginning of lockdowns, that they would eventually have another one? Well, what about not supporting the war? What if public opinion, not being what they want, right? That they would bring it in that way. Well, it's happening in our presence today, as there's official warnings that there's going to be another lockdown. Slovakia, stupid commercial. I'll get it.
Want a free iPhone 11? Yes, free for eligible.
Can't even fast forward past it. Okay, here we go.
This is a breaking news alert for a new lockdown measure that they are instituting. Conservative analysts are warning that COVID-era lockdown protocols are being dusted off, and a new era of control is right around the corner. A document released under the banner of energy stability is raising unsettling questions. Where does conservation end, and where does government control begin? The International Energy Agency published what it calls a 10-point plan. They attempt to shield nations from oil shocks, but buried deep inside of the language of efficiency and conservation is something familiar to each one of us who lived through the last global emergency. A template of complete control, one that looks eerily similar to the blueprints for restriction that we saw during COVID. The global control system is naming this template sheltering from oil shock. At the center of the plan is a proposal that fundamentally alters freedom of movement. They're instructing you to alternate your driving days based on your license plate number. They want to limit when you are allowed to travel, and they want to create permit-style restrictive systems for your personal mobility. Step 2 is travel suppression. They will institute mandatory reduced speed limits.
You should not be able to enter a city, right?
Travel and discouraging air travel. They will introduce soft bans through inconvenience and ambiguity. Step 3 is behavioral enforcement. There is an encouragement to work from home, reducing daily commuting and physical movement, normalizing a so-called stay-in-place lifestyle. Step 4 is household control. They're wanting to push to eliminate gas cooking in favor of full electric dependence. They want to expand oversight into how you cook, how you heat your home, and ultimately how you live. They want to increase dependence on centralized energy systems. Step 5 is rationing without calling it rationing.
Yep.
Slower speeds, fewer travel days. They also want to not explicitly ban, but place practical limits on what you can use. They're using ambiguity as a tool of control. They're using terms like where alternatives exist, they should be used and enforced. When possible, citizens should behave in this way. And this is a behavioral condition.
They don't want dissidents.
Explicitly referencing pandemic-era compliance.
Your compliance will be required, right? So things are about to change really quick, as if 2020 was not a start point. We told you it was a precursor, that the vaccine was not the MOTB, but the MOTB would soon follow it, right? You know, that was just a precursor, you know. And look at how many people got it. Look at how many people took the stupid test, right? You know, for a pandemic that wasn't even real. But World War III, that's pretty real. And then not to mention the reactions that people are going to have, you know, once the draft really starts coming into play and they start knocking at the door. And not to mention pulling up military retirees, which a lot of military retirees don't even agree with the decision to go to war with Iran because they know that they can't win. You know, a lot of the military retirees, you know, they pretty much felt differently when they returned from Iraq as well. You know, and yet Iran is not even like Iraq. It's 3 times the size of Iraq, and a lot of people came back with their, you know, with their legs blown off, etc. You know, just with the terrorist groups, the CIA, Al Qaeda, because that's what it was, the CIA, Mossad, ISIS. You know, all of those, you know, are little cells that they try to say are sleeper cells over here, and then they're trying to tie Iran to every bit of terrorism, right? You know, that, that the CIA didn't create Al Qaeda, right? That it's always been Iran. See, anything they can blame on Iran. And yet, you know, now you're starting to see more false flag movements. And, of course, that big word, the anti-Shem word, you know. We're not going to say what that word is. We already know what it is because, you know, these people don't even talk right. You know, they slur their words. They don't even have the Hebrew language correct. You know, because, of course, you know, these are bastards dwelling in Ashdod. And these bastards, you know, are planning even more surprises, right? You know, so pretty much, though, if you say anything against them, you know, they're going to shut it down. Well, that's just it. A famine of the word is coming. It's right around the corner. You can see with all these measures in place, you know, get this while you still can. Because we're not going to be out here much longer. I mean, once they start doing a bunch of lockdowns, eventually they're going to lock down the internet. If they're going to lock down the places in place. See, that's what they didn't do, is they didn't shut down the internet during so-called COVID, right? You know, they did, however, take out keywords. You couldn't say vaccine. You couldn't really say coronavirus hoax on YouTube, but now you sort of can. Well, they're not too worried about COVID anymore because that's already a done deal. 2020 is already 6 years ago. But they're going to really clamp this down, and they're going to get rid of it, because anything that does not go with the narrative that Trump or Hegseth wants, they're going to go after that, right? Because they're not reporting the war the way that they want to, and yet the Epstein files, because it's really about getting away with that, right? These child molesters, these pedophiles in power, see, they should not regard the kings or princes, right? Because everyone knows what a pedophile Esau Edom is, what the high ranks of Esau Edom does to children, right? And even guys like Tom Hanks or Steven Spielberg, ain't going to be able to hide much longer, because everybody knows what goes on behind Hollywood. It's going to be a lot more than Roseanne Barr that's already revealed shit. Gene Hackman, before they killed him, was about to reveal shit because he was the narrator of Epstein. Anybody tied to Epstein usually gets killed. And yet, at the same time, though, a lot of people are thinking, they believe the bullshit that this is going to be over in 2 weeks. But they don't have an exit strategy. Iran is still fighting back. So they really can't control the narrative anymore. It's gotten out of control. They can't really control the narrative. They can't spin it. And yet you're seeing uproars of the people everywhere. They don't want to fight for the Israeli state. They know that this is for greater Israel. That doesn't benefit the United States whatsoever. And they can't even figure out what was the fucking reason to bomb Iran to begin with. Weren't they supposed to be in negotiations with them? Oh, wait, that's the same thing they did with Saddam. So a lot of people kind of know what happened with Saddam. That, Saddam wasn't allowing the UN inspectors in there, even though they were in there all the time. But, supposedly, he had weapons of mass destruction. A lot of people found out what a fraud that was. Syria was using sarin gas, right? And that was a justification for bombing Syria. And eventually they had to use terrorism to get in there. Well, they tried all those things with Iran, and they couldn't get in. So the only thing to do now is to try to invade Karg Island. And Karg Island is about to be invaded, but they're waiting. See, they're patiently waiting. They're like, go ahead, bring it on. And you bomb our energy infrastructure, look at what we can do to yours. And, they bomb more fuel facilities, look at what they can do to theirs. Everything is hanging on the edge, and that'd be the perfect way to bring it in. That's why it's there. See, the Most High is the one guiding all this, because he's about to return. He's about to send Yahweh Shai to return, to gather his elect, which we pray we're part of that hopeful elect, the ones that are going out here and doing the work, day in, day out, no matter what the weather is, we're still going out and we're teaching, we're still doing videos at home. But our ability to do this, ain't going to be around much longer, meaning that it'll be a done deal. Once everything, continues to happen and we can't even put videos up anymore, well, that's a wrap. Especially if we're just locked down, and you're hearing about all the restrictions that are going to be in place. We told you about this new dystopian new world order that'd be in place, right? Well, 2nd Ezra chapter 15 goes into that a lot, and yet a lot of people are against this war alone. Well, that's not going to change just because you lock everything down. There's going to be resistance, and there's going to be... Oh, and don't forget, ISIS is now controlling the TSA because the government is still in a shutdown. Yeah, DHS is still not being funded. So they're going to send in ISIS into the airports now, to try to fix that. This guy couldn't even fix a hole in a roof even if it was leaking. That's like trying to fix the Titanic after it hit the iceberg. And anybody getting on board with Trump, well, they said it themselves. That'd be like getting on the Titanic after it hit the iceberg to, take sides with Donald Trump. That's what it'd be like. So they're the ones saying it. And it's hilarious to see all the allies turning against Babylon. See, all of the prophecies that we talked about for years, it's all happening. And it's just a matter of time before Gog Magog enters the war. Right now, you're just seeing little bits here, like the Tu-160s being provided to Iran's Air Force. And, of course, nuclear submarines also being provided to Iran to help them keep the Strait of Hormuz. Yeah, Russia's already sent them some submarines, so good luck. Good luck trying to send the Navy in to reclaim the Strait of Hormuz, which you've given them 48 hours to do so, right? Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot Donald Trump also doubled down and said that, we're going to remove the sanctions against Iran oil. You can sell your oil now. And Iran, they kind of smirked at that, and they just said, no thanks, we're sold out. That's already sold out. That's a done deal. We already done sold that, meaning that they didn't need the lifting of the sanctions. You know why? They ain't dealing with the dollar anyways. You know how many fucking years that there's been sanctions against Iran? They've been dealing without the dollar for quite some time. So their threats are nothing more than empty threats. So here we go, you know. 2nd Ezra chapter 15, verse 5. Behold, saith the Most High Yahweh, I will bring plagues upon the world, the sword, famine, death, and destruction. And like everything else, though, there's already rationing going on. There's already shortages going on just simply because diesel fuel is really outrageous, you know, causing a lot of things to be depleted, not to mention a lot of that shit's already going to the troops that are being deployed secretly. It won't be a secret much longer. And a lot of people ain't going to just be quiet about it, you know. Especially the death toll. I'm just amazed how quiet it's been about that. You know, about the death toll. I think a lot of people do know that the death toll is more than 9 or 10. And that there's more than just 200 injuries, you know, but that's all the Department of War has, or the Pentagon has released on it, right? For wickedness has exceedingly polluted the whole earth, and their hurtful works are fulfilled, meaning that, okay, that's it. This is a wrap. Behold, my people's led as a flock to the slaughter. You know, they're going to join Esau in death. I will not suffer them to dwell in the land of Egypt, which is talking about modern-day America. I will bring them out with a mighty hand and a stretch out arm and smite Egypt with plagues as before and destroy all the land thereof. Well, the land of Egypt was never fully destroyed. But this time, Babylon, Esau, Edom, will be destroyed by nuclear fire. There's a nuclear war around the corner, right? Woe to the world and them that dwell therein. Verse 14. For the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another with swords in their hands, meaning that everybody's going to be against each other, you know. You're either a MAGA or you're not a MAGA. You're either with the president or you're an enemy of the state. That's pretty much how it's going to be. For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another, which shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. Meaning that they ain't going to give a fuck what President Trump has to say. They're not going to give a fuck. And the law enforcement, what's going to be interesting, though, is that during this time period, well, even they're going to be looking for survival. You know, they're not going to care either. You know, they're going to pretty much try to survive as well. Man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able. Why? Because the cities are going to be locked down. They're going to be troubled. There's going to be hell everywhere. Because of their pride, the cities shall be troubled. Houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid. Ain't gonna be safe, and not to mention Jade Helm, the UN Army after next, you know, military, you know, UN military is going to be controlling those cities. You know, that's how they plan to do it. Plan to bring in the New World Order, because everybody else is going to go fighting, you know, fighting against Iran. Not to mention Russia and Turkey and all them are about to bring in their troops as well. They're going to be fighting in World War III while they're going to have the UN troops over here locking down the cities. And not to mention, there's one more thing that has to pass, and that's in the midst of all this, in the midst of World War III, in the midst of the lockdowns, in the midst of all the chaos. They're going to usher in the MOTB. They're going to require everyone to have an implant. That's why they're coming into the cities, to institute this new law, the New World Order. Man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with a sword, and spoil their goods because of lack of bread and for great tribulation. So in the midst of all this, they're going to usher in the MOTB. Everybody's going to have to be implanted in order to get commodities, because there is going to be food scarcity. All this, you know, and they're saying that at the current system and the current rate of this war, that by September, everything will be gone, you know. This thing cannot last till September. Isn't that what Hex has said? That, this thing could go all the way till September? So big plans are being made. The New World Order, I think that will be in place before the year ends. And this has been the hopeful year, you know. Or not the hopeful year. We already had that. But, you know, hopefully it all falls into place anyways. But this is the year of apostates and of sellouts, right? And, of course, of agents, right? Because you got agents within camps, you know. You got people that are secretly, you know, revealing your location, right? Because, again, you know, it's all about tracking and controlling everything. And that's what they want to implant everyone with. Everybody's going to turn on you very soon, you know. And you're going to find out who those agents are, you know. So hopefully this is our year as we slowly but surely approach the Passover. So hopefully all this has been edifying. For that I want to say Bracha the Yahweh, Bracha the Yahweh Shai, Ba'Shem Rakakadash, Wa Abab the Ball. Bracha Thum, Jehovah Olek. Keep on praying, man. We're almost out of here. Shalom. This could be our year.